you mentioned something, and when talking about kind of language and reclaiming language, and I want to lean in a little bit on that because I think it is an important part of the conversation that
Absolutely.
we don't really talk about, and I think important part of lots of conversations when we talk about, you know, communities that maybe are kind of outside of the mainstream, shall we say. And so let's lean into a little bit about some of this reclaiming of language and what that means to have agency. And so, Rebecca, I want you to jump into this conversation as well in terms of um, what does that mean? And folks are talking, right? As we, it used to special needs, disabled, otherly abled. All right. So when you were inviting people to sit at the table with you, we want to make sure we're doing it in a way which you're also not offending them, and they're like, I don't know if I want to be at that table. So, what are some of the like? How should we begin to think about how we enter those conversations to make sure that folks do have a seat at at the table, and we're focusing on those A and D, right? Agency and diversity of voices and thoughts.
Absolutely. I think the first thing is asking people how they want to identify. I also think it's important to notice that every euphemism for disability has come out of largely the education space or the family leadership space. It's called the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We don't have special needs. I don't have special abilities. Last time I checked, I can't teleport. If I could, it would make managing luggage a lot easier. But we continue to use this language because non disabled people are uncomfortable talking about disability. And that's not our problem. That's non disabled people's problem. And so, I mean, I literally, in working in previous roles with candidates running for office, I would actually make them sit in Wonder Woman stance and say the word disability and talk about people with disabilities until they became comfortable with it. I think in using euphemisms, we fundamentally disconnect students with disabilities from their civil rights. They may not know that they have a disability. They may not know that after they go to high school and graduate and go to college, that their mom is not going to be there for them managing their accommodations process because they've never been told that they're disabled. I think the other piece of it that's really important is the fact that even in how we talk about special education and teachers working in special education, it's often grounded in pity and charity instead of
Mhm.
innovation. Where the reality is, there is not a single innovation in the field of public education today that is applied to all students that does not have its roots in the education of students with disabilities and has been Columbused by modern infrastructure. It's like, oh, we discovered this thing. It's called an IEP, but we're not going to call it that for non disabled people. We'll call it an individualized learning plan. So they're not the same thing, even though they're identical. And we look at that and we're like, that's another thing that came from the disability space. It's the curb cut effect. It's just like captioning or iPods, all of this technology that has been mainstream for use by non disabled people that has its roots in education for students with disabilities. But then why don't we hold up educators for students with disabilities as the real innovators in our public schools? Why don't we talk about special education as the hub for innovation that it actually is?